I'm Leanne Tran, psychologist who's worked with families whose kids don't fit the mould for almost 20 years. I've worked with children for decades, but I know parents are the real change makers when it comes to their kids. Having 3 kids of my own means I know it's not easy. Parent Like a Psychologist is all about simplifying how you support your kids with psychology information filtered through years of experience to take you from overwhelmed to confident. Come on in.
I think it really comes down to our mindfulness and how we utilize what we've been taught. And then I think it's so important to acknowledge that there are people who aren't going to be safe, but that doesn't mean we have to be alone in a room using this technology ourselves. We can be with other people, have people help observe in our homes to make sure. And then we can also really focus in on the idea that technology is going to stick around for humanity for a while. And the more we actually pass this on to future generations in an equitable and sustainable manner, the better humanity's going to be off.
Yeah, so I agree. And it's lots about how to manage it, learning about it, and how to manage it and use it in a way that's helpful for
Mhm.
each individual. But I hear what you're saying too about it being a way that it can be positive for kids and through their experience of it and the creativity, but also in helping to form connections and friendships as well. And there was another point I wanted to, oh, yeah, you mentioned as well how you think that oftentimes creativity and media on and potentially tablets and games can help kids communicate as well. Is that something that you've seen in your work?
Absolutely. When I got started in healthcare, I quickly ended up working with some cases that a lot of people wouldn't want to. Not necessarily because of the individual themselves. I've learned a lot. There are some very hard things for people to work with. Some people use the term nonverbal. I personally don't like that phrasing. I know it's the common one just because the reason I don't like it is it tends to make people think that those individuals can't communicate, which is very much not true.
Mm,
But I have worked with numerous people with very severe autism, people who cannot form words. And one of the great things that I've learned about technology is they can quite literally be a voice, a way for people to communicate. Someone very near and dear to me, my niece, she'll use clips of videos to communicate why she's upset or why she wants to spend time with people. And I think part of what comes down to technology is a lot of people just aren't willing from time to time. I'm a big advocate that the first step forwards are always being willing to do things and actually starting. You don't have to make massive footholds forward each time. You just have to be willing to try something.
mhm.
And one of the things that I've learned from people who are nonverbal, do not communicate, whatever, however someone wants to phrase it, is that traditional means do not serve everyone. Um, and therefore, it's not really fair to call them traditional. It seems to be a mindset that's very exclusionary. And so when I look at technology, one of the things I try to do is explore how that can be used. Because it's not just famous people like Stephen Hawking who are going to have access to these things. The more we are forgiving and the more we encourage the use of technology for people who are not able to do things, many of us can, the better we're going to be. And we've seen this with like wheelchairs and ramps and things and elevators. But I mean, I'm also a big advocate that I think at some point AI is going to be used to do some really wondrous things like give voice to those who can't talk, help people write who don't have the ability to hold a pencil in their hand, explore the world through maps and things that they would never be able to see.
Mm,
And I think it really comes down to the main thing with technology, if we want it to be good for humanity, we have to use it in ways that are good for humanity. It's cut and dry there. And there's a lot of greed around the world, but there's so many good people. And I think those people are always going to fight for that technology to be used well.
Yeah, that's it's another example too of why just cutting it out is not always the best strategy, and finding the balance that allows you to find that good for humanity in there, and also for each individual as well. I think what I find parents, I mean, it's because I guess young people come to you to do that work and then it finishes. And what's hard for parents in the home is that the boundaries around it can be difficult. But I think each family has the capacity to find their own way of managing that fits with their individual child. So that's really for me what I see the challenge is, or the key to being able to manage it at home. But the boundaries are going to be different for all children as well. Some may need more, some need less, and all of that kind of thing. But it's amazing to think about all the positives it can have for individualizing how a person can communicate with other people. Yeah.
Absolutely. I think it's with all things as human beings. We all have, I think it's very true. We all have some tendency to take something to an extreme, right? Like we all have some element of something we've liked too much or done too much of. We don't all have very intense addictive tendencies, but a part of human life is moderation and learning how
Mm,
to do things accurately. And I've seen people who are very hesitant to let go of their technology. And I think for some people it's very valid. Like it is, if it is your voice, when you take that away, it is your voice. But there are high quality options outside of having a tablet that has access to YouTube or things.
mm.
And I think that's part of us as human beings, because we are so creative and so passionate, is to help find alternative technology that can help.
Yeah, definitely. I'm a big advocate for it in school as well, particularly for kids who have difficulties with academics like reading and writing. Writing's one thing I find is really a challenge quite often for autistic youth, or with those with ADHD. And it's not because the creativity isn't there, it's there in their mind and they have an amazing story to tell. But the act of writing itself is a barrier. So to use things like talk to text is an amazing way for them to be able to show what they can achieve and create without that barrier. So for me, that's one example of the kinds of things we're talking about to make it, to that the total ban of that would miss out on those kids benefiting in that way. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So I know that a lot of your work centers around creativity, which is brilliant. I did want to ask, that beautiful design behind you, is that something that you've created?
Yes, I did create this. So I made this on Canva, was able
Wow.
to design it. Speaking of technology, various programs that if I didn't have access to them, I wouldn't know. But I also, so I designed these, try to make them so that they're calming and
Mm-hmm.
considerate. And I know a lot of people may not do that, but again, one of the beauty of creativity is individuality.
Mm-hmm.
And I've seen many other people create some wonderful products and items
Mm.
through a variety of different means.
Yeah, that's great. I'm wondering, as a last question, if you have any advice or tips for parents who are looking to embrace creativity with their family or for their children, that you would give as kind of some starting steps, or, yeah, any pearls of wisdom you might have.
So speaking of technology, I'll kind of emphasize to that we kind of live in this golden age of education. I know a lot of it's paid, behind a paywall to explore
Mm-hmm.
things. But as someone who does a lot of online training as well to keep my education and my information up, There are so many great ways, even if you don't know how to do the thing you want to do with your family, to watch things on YouTube, to watch videos, to access documents, to look at patterns to follow. And so I'd encourage that. And I would also encourage when you're starting that, really emphasize the importance of stepping away and having boundaries with that creativity. I often
Mm-hmm.
tell people like so much of my life is public speaking and events and things that I don't often watch videos on events or ways to get better at things just to have a boundary to separate myself from. And so I also put a lot of my passion into side things that I never will expect to make money out of.
Mm-hmm.
And I think with creativity, it's really important to have things that are kind of dry to counteract creativity. If we spend all of our time doing something creative, we're not going to have time for other aspects of life. And there's also this really beautiful symmetry to balancing creativity and daily life really well.
Mm. I think that that is really good advice, because I think the flip side can be true too. Sometimes we get drawn by how much we have to do in our, production list or to-do list, that it's the creativity is a nice balance. But true, the other way can happen. If we totally indulge in our passions all the time, the rest of life becomes hard. But it's so the boundaries are a great way to kind of manage and have the breaks and balance. But that there's lots of technology out there to help kickstart some creativity. And then I do think once that little spark starts, it's easier to keep it going, isn't it? And once you work out how to draw something, you kind of explore a bit more and learn a painting technique or something, and then go far with that. So that's really great advice for families. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
I'm just wondering, as we've had this conversation, whether there was anything more that you wanted to say while we were talking, or any last kind of word of advice you'd like to give.
Yeah, there's one more thing I'll emphasize. And this is a big thing. I was actually thinking about it when I made the last point. So a lot of my professional life is creating for other people and creating for the community. And I kind of touched on this a little bit, but I really want to encourage, and I know a lot of people want to have a creative career. I would just advise being very cautious, from time to time. And I don't mean necessarily because people are going to be awful or mean, but there is something so pure and so powerful about having a hobby that you are not expecting to ever make money from.
Mm-hmm.
I know I talked about having balance and things, but to have something that is just yours or just your
Mm,
family's, and it's not going to be posted online, it's not going to be shared with thousands of people, that is really good for the human spirit. I spend so much of my life online, and because of that, I deal a lot with reviews and comments and critiques from people who are either really happy, kind of middle, or just deeply unhappy. And if I
mm,
did not have those things that were just mine, I would
mm-hmm.
have quit this career a long time ago. So I would always
Mm,
encourage having at least one thing that is just yours. And if for any reason, I would emphasize it being for the sake of your mental health and
mm,
for the sake of that like human spirit. It can be very compelling to want to jump onto something when someone talks about something well on a podcast or things, but it doesn't mean that you have to. It doesn't mean you can't. But I would just reflect on it and find out what is healthy for you. And if it stops
mm.
being healthy for you, then stop. I mean, it's that simple. So that's the last thing I
Yeah.
would say.
That's another really great piece of advice, and another way to kind of have that boundary, isn't it, between what's what's for others and what's for us. And there's something just so amazing for doing something just for the pure joy of it and embracing that creativity. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. I think this is something I do feel really passionate about, for giving young people an opportunity to explore their strengths, and so talking to you today about doing that through creativity has been really helpful, and I'm sure helped lots of parents out there as well.
Thank you very much. I very much enjoyed this conversation.
Yeah, me too. Thanks for listening to this episode of Parent Like a Psychologist. If you found it helpful, please share on Instagram so other parents can benefit too, and tag me at Leanne Tran Psychology so that I can say a big thank you. Head over to leannetran.com.au to join the village for bite-sized psychology tips straight to your inbox. I really hope this podcast has brought a new perspective and you a step closer towards a calm parent and a thriving child. Have a delightful day.